Don't you hate it when you record something only to find out that you didn't actually press the record button? Hey, let's talk about the tech lie that nobody is talking about. Also, you know what? Shout out to everybody that actually paid attention and gave me good feedback and in the comments section. Didn't think it would go up that well, but let's keep that momentum going. I think what I want to do is kind of talk about the tech lie in the industry that nobody talks about. You know what? I've been seeing lately that there's this narrative that AI is destroying the tech industry. Software engineers are becoming obsolete. Learn to code is more like learn to find a new career, and there's doom and gloom everywhere. And look, I get why people are scared. There have been massive layoffs over the past couple of years in the tech industry. Entry level positions have just kind of disappeared. Job postings that used to get hundreds of applications are now getting thousands, and it feels like it's bottoming out. Well, here's the thing, and you know by now I'm not here to sell any comfortable lie and stuff. The story you're being told about AI crashing the software industry is missing about 90% of the actual picture. AI is involved, sure, but blaming AI for what's happening in tech right now is, blaming the weatherman for the rain. Let me tell you what everybody's saying. The narrative goes like this. AI coding tools like GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT, they can write code now, so companies don't need as many engineers. Junior developers are especially screwed because AI can do the entry-level work. We're heading towards a future where a handful of 10x engineers with AI tools can replace entire development teams. It sounds scary, right? And there's a tiny kernel of truth in there, which makes it more convincing. But it's missing so much context that it's basically a lie. Imagine in 2010, someone told you, Google is destroying the education industry because nobody needs to memorize facts anymore. You can just Google it. Teachers are going to become obsolete. You'd probably laugh at that, right? Because yeah, Google changed education, but it didn't eliminate the need for teachers. It changed what teaching looks like. Teachers spend less time on route memorization and more time on critical thinking and analysis and helping students evaluate sources. The job evolved, and that's what's close to what's happening with AI in software development. And here's what nobody wants to talk about because boring and it doesn't get clicks. The tech industry is experiencing a correction after years of absolutely insane growth and overhiring. Tech companies were hiring like drunken sailors. Interest rates were basically zero, which meant money was cheap. Investors were throwing cash at anything with tech in the name. Companies were valued based on growth, not profitability. So what did they do? They hired aggressively, sometimes stupid aggressively. I worked at a tech startup in 2022 that hired 3 people to do the job that only one really needed. And the thinking was, we need to scale fast. And if we're growing 50% year over year, we'll need 3 people doing this job eventually. So let's hire them now. That startup laid off almost all their people within a year and a half because AI could do their jobs? No, it was because we never actually needed 3 people to do that one job in the first place. Here's another example of a friend who works at a major company. And here's what I'm going to do as a side note. Whenever I say major tech company or be really vague of these things, I'm trying to protect the people and myself of these jobs that we all still have. I still work with 3 major tech companies, and that's where all my friends are. I'm just kind of one person just rambling on here, so the last thing I want to do is have anybody lose their job. Side note over. In 2021, my friend at this tech company, his team of 12 engineers were managing a product with about 50,000 users. The company projected massive growth, so they hired up to 25 engineers. By 2023, they had 75,000 users. Good growth, but not the explosion that they predicted. So they laid off 8 of the engineers. The CEO's statement mentioned efficiency gains from AI tools as one of the reasons for the layoffs. My friend had told me the real story. They were just overstaffed for the actual work that needed to be done. The AI tools helped, sure, but they could have managed with 15 engineers even without AI. They just finally admitted they didn't need 25. Then you add in economic factors. Interest rates went up. Suddenly investors wanted to see profitability, not just growth. The free money spigot turned off, and companies that had been burning cash to grow fast suddenly needed to actually make money. They cut costs. Easiest cost to cut is the employees that they probably shouldn't have hired in the first place. Here's where the AI excuse comes in, the cover for business decisions. This is where it gets sneaky, and this is something that I've seen up close working with multiple companies through layoffs. AI has become this perfect excuse for layoffs that companies wanted to do anyways. Imagine you're a CEO and you need to lay off 20% of your workforce because you overhired and investors are demanding profitability. How do you frame that? Option A, we made bad hiring decisions and now we're fixing our mistakes by firing a bunch of people. Option B, we're leveraging cutting edge AI technology to become more efficient and competitive. Which one looks better? Which one makes your stock price go up instead of down? I was consulting with a mid-sized company last year and they laid off their entire QA team. It was about 15 people. The press release talked about AI powered testing tools enabling us to maintain quality with a leaner structure. And you want to know the truth? They've been wanting to outsource QA for 2 years because it was cheaper. They had already hired a QA agency in India before they even evaluated AI testing tools. AI tools were real and they did help, but they weren't the reason for the layoffs. They were the PR friendly explanation for the layoffs. It's like when a restaurant closes and the owner says, the rent got too high, when really the food was mediocre and nobody was coming. The rent was always high. That's not why you failed. A friend of mine got laid off from a tech company along with 30% of his department. And so the company announcement specifically mentioned AI tools reducing the need for headcount. Again, my friend's team wasn't even using AI tools yet. They'd done a pilot program that showed minimal productivity gains and decided not to roll it out widely. The layoffs had nothing to do with AI. The company had missed revenue targets for 3 quarters in a row and they needed to cut costs. We implemented AI and got more efficient. Sounds a lot better to shareholders than we're struggling and we need to cut costs. So this brings into the junior developer situation, which is a perfect storm. The junior developer market, that's genuinely rough right now. It's not just AI. It's not even mostly AI. Here's what's happening. During the pandemic, coding boot camps exploded. Everyone was stuck at home, tech jobs paid well, and it could be done remotely. Suddenly, everyone and their cousin was learning code. The market got flooded with junior developers. At the same time, companies were hiring like crazy. So for a brief period, even boot camp grads with minimal experience could land jobs. It felt like a gold rush. Thing about gold rushes is they don't last. Now you've got tens of thousands of junior developers competing for entry-level positions, and companies that were hiring anyone with a pulse in 21-1 are being selective again. They can afford to be picky. I talked to a hiring manager at a tech company last month. She told me they posted a junior developer position and they got about 3,000 applications in 48 hours. 3,000 is a lot. In 2021, the same position would have got maybe 200 applications and they would have struggled to find qualified candidates. It's harder to get a junior developer job, but that's more supply and demand than AI replacing anybody. The AI angle comes because companies can say, well, we need fewer junior developers because senior developers are more productive with AI tools. And there is some truth to that. A senior developer with GitHub or Copilot can write boilerplate code faster, which is often what junior developers spend their time on. But here's what they're not telling you. Those companies always preferred to hire senior developers when they could. Junior developers were traditionally hired for 2 reasons. They were cheaper and there weren't enough senior developers to go around. Now, with thousands of applicants for every position, companies can hold out for more experienced candidates. They're using AI efficiency as an excuse, but really they're just being more selective because they can be. It's like how during the 2008 recession, entry-level jobs started requiring bachelor's degrees when they rarely required high school diplomas. It wasn't because the jobs got harder. It was because employers could demand more when workers were desperate. So what is changing? It's the nature of the work. AI is having real effects on software development. I don't want to pretend that it's not. Let me tell you what's actually changing. It's the work. The work is shifting from writing code to designing systems and managing AI generated code. And let me give you a more concrete example of even my own work. I was recently building some data processing pipelines. And, 5 years ago, I would have spent maybe 60% of my time writing code, 20% designing the system, and, another 20% testing and debugging. Now I'm spending about 30% of my time writing code. And yeah, that's a lot of prompting AI to write code for me. About 40% designing the system and figuring out the right approach, and then 30% reviewing, testing, and debugging the AI generated code. The total amount of time didn't change, but the nature of the work changed. I have a friend who's a senior engineer at a big fintech company down here. He told me that junior developers on his team used to spend a lot of time writing unit tests. Well, it's important, but tedious work. Now they use AI code to generate most unit tests, which sounds like it would eliminate the work, right? But what actually happened is that they're writing more comprehensive tests because it's faster, and they're spending more time on integration testing and thinking about edge cases. The testing work didn't disappear. It just got more sophisticated. It's like what happened when Excel became widespread. Like, accountants didn't become obsolete, but the job changed from spending hours doing calculations by hand to spending more time on analysis, forecasting, and strategic thinking. This is a real skills gap that nobody talks about. And here's something I've noticed that should actually worry people more than AI. There's a growing gap between developers who understand what problems they're solving and those who just throw prompts at AI hoping something works. It's not about the AI itself. Like, good AI coding tools tools, like especially the ones trained specifically for code generation, they're incredibly powerful. I mean, I built my own platform for this exact reason. AI can generate entire applications from prompts when it's done right. Issue is the people not understanding what they're actually building or why. I was helping someone who used an AI platform to generate a landing page for their business, and it looks great and it functioned properly, but they wanted to add a simple contact form that integrated with their existing CRM system. And they had no idea where to start because they didn't understand how those pieces fit together. The AI had built something that worked, but they had no mental model of web applications. So any customization or problem solving beyond what the AI could generate was impossible for them. And that's the real risk. Not all AI tools are bad, like they're great, but the people that use them as a black box without understanding their underlying concepts. So, GPS, it's amazing. It gets you where you need to go. But if you never learn to read a map or understand basic navigation, you're helpless when the GPS fails or when you need to go somewhere the GPS doesn't know about. The developers who are thriving with AI are the ones who understand software architecture, user experience, system design. They can use AI to build quickly, but they know what they're building and why. They can troubleshoot when things go wrong. They can customize and extend beyond what AI generates. The people struggling are the ones that are treating AI like magic. They put in a prompt, they get out an app with no understanding of what's happening in between. Here's something darker I've started to see, and I think it's actually worth talking about. Some companies are using AI as a way to reduce their dependence on skilled workers, and it's not really about efficiency, it's about power. If you're a company with a team of highly skilled engineers, those engineers, they have leverage. They can negotiate for better salaries, better working conditions, more flexibility. If they quit, you're in trouble because replacing them's hard. If you can de-skill the work and make it so that less experienced developers can do the job with AI assistance, suddenly your workers have less leverage and they're more replaceable. You can pay them less. You can demand more from them. I saw this happen at a company I consulted with. They had a team of senior engineers maintaining a complex legacy system. Those engineers were expensive, and then they knew that. They pushed back on unrealistic deadlines. They advocated for technical debt reduction. They had power in the organization. Management started investing heavily in documentation and AI tools, not to help the senior engineers, but to make it possible for junior engineers to maintain the system with AI assistance. Then they started pushing the senior engineers through various means. Like they were denying raises, assigning them to less interesting projects, or making the work environment less appealing. The explicit goal, which I heard in leadership meetings, was to reduce dependence on expensive senior talent. They wanted a team of cheaper, less experienced engineers who could use AI tools to maintain the system. And did it work? Sort of. The system got maintained, but with more bugs and slower feature development. But from management's perspective, it was worth it because they cut costs by 40% and gained more control over the team. That's a real threat from AI. Not that it'll replace workers, but that companies will use it as justification to de-skill work and reduce worker leverage. Let's summarize what's real and what's hype. Here's the hype. AI is going to replace all software developers and the industry is crashing. What's real? The tech industry is just going through a correction of years of overhiring. Companies are using AI as PR-friendly excuses for layoffs they always wanted to do in the first place. The job market is tight because of economic factors and oversupply of junior developers, not because AI is replacing everyone. I think here's the real concerns that you should have. First, the barrier to entry of junior developers is genuinely higher now. Companies can be more selective. They are looking for people who can add value immediately. So if you're trying to break into the industry, it's harder than it was a few years ago, but it's not impossible. And it's not because AI replaced junior developers. It's because the market is oversaturated and companies are being picky. Second, developers who don't develop strong fundamentals are at risk. If your entire skill set is, I can prompt AI to write code, you're not actually valuable. You need to understand code well enough to evaluate, debug, and optimize what the AI produces. Third is the nature of development work is changing. There's more emphasis on system design, architecture, and managing AI-generated code. There's less emphasis on writing boilerplate from scratch. If you're not adapting to that shift, you'll struggle. The fourth one is companies are using AI as justification for cost-cutting and de-skilling work. This is especially true at companies with weak engineering culture. And you got to be aware of this and choose your employers carefully. What's the practical advice I'm giving you here? How do I navigate all this? If you're trying to break in tech, you got to focus on building real projects that demonstrate you can ship working software, not just complete tutorials. Learn the fundamentals deeply, like data structure, algorithms, system designs. Don't just learn to prompt AI. Learn to evaluate and prove the code it generates. And be patient. The market is tight, but it's still hiring. It just takes longer than it did in 2021. If you're a junior developer, you got to double down on learning. Use AI tools, absolutely, but make sure you understand what they're actually producing. When AI generates code for you, dig into it, understand why it works. Try to write the code yourself without AI. You got to build that fundamental knowledge while you have time. If you're the senior developer, you got to lean into the parts of the job that AI can't do so well: system design, architecture, mentoring, understanding business needs, and translating them to technical solutions. Get really good at working with AI tools, but focus on using them to move faster, not just do the same work in less time. For everyone, be skeptical when companies blame AI for business decisions. When you hear AI driven efficiency as the reason for layoffs, ask what's really happening. When you see AI powered in the job description, you got to ask what that actually means. You don't let companies use AI as this magic excuse for whatever they want to do. So I think the bottom line here is the software industry isn't crashing and AI isn't destroying it. What's happening is a combination of economic correction and market oversaturation. And companies are using AI as convenient cover for cost cutting that they wanted to do in the first place. AI is changing the nature of software development work, absolutely, but it's not eliminating it. It's shifting it, just like every other tool that came before. The people who are going to struggle aren't the ones who can't use AI. It's the ones who become dependent on AI without developing a real expertise. The people who are going to thrive are the ones who use AI as a power tool to amplify their skills. The real story isn't AI is taking our jobs. It's companies are using AI as an excuse while the industry goes through a normal correction after years of irrational exuberance. And that's not as scary as the headlines say, but it's the truth. And knowing the truth means that you can actually prepare for what's coming instead of just panicking about the problem that actually doesn't exist.